Okay, so welcome to those of you who made it to class and everyone else that's watching online. Is there any questions about anything before we start? I know the assignment's due in a week. It might be, no. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about another high-level methodology. This is called an attack tree. It's the last of the high-level methodologies that we'll talk about. The difference between STRIDE, evaluation frameworks, and attack trees you can think of as the follows. So evaluation framework, it's sort of a comparison. So you're comparing multiple things, different ways of doing passwords or whatever to each other. STRIDE, you tend to look at one thing. So you might look at like biometrics, for example, and then you think about what are the spoofing attacks, what are the non-repudiation attacks, information disclosure, and all the different parts of STRIDE. And then for an attack tree, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in even further. So we're going to zoom into one system and one attack. So one attack on one system, and then we're going to create a kind of like tree to describe all the different ways of attacking that one system to achieve one goal. Okay, so we start with what's the adversary's goal. So the adversary's goal is whatever, I want to break this system in this particular way. And then a tree is just meant to basically say what are all the possible ways the adversary might go about doing that. Sometimes we distinguish between the word attack and the word threat. An attack is something that like actually occurred. A threat is sort of like there's the potential that there could be an attack there, but maybe it hasn't been exploited. And so we don't care about that in this case. So you can think of an attack tree more like a threat tree. So you can include things in a threat tree that haven't actually happened yet that are plausible ways of attacking the system. Some people call it a threat tree, but attack tree is the more common terminology. And you can combine it with STRIDE. So STRIDE will help you like kind of brainstorm ideas of like what you could put into your attack tree as well. So they're not mutually exclusive. Attack trees, even though it's a high-level methodology, you can do attack tree of anything. It doesn't matter. It could be software, hardware, people, whatever. At the same time, you can go into a lot of detail. If you know a lot about the system and you know a lot of the different attacks, you can go into a lot of detail. So to illustrate that, we're going to do an attack tree across 3 lectures. So that's quite a bit. And our attack tree is going to be very big when we're done. And we're going to do it on a protocol, but I have to teach you about that protocol as well. So a lot of the lectures will be on those details as well. What does it look like when it's done? So it's kind of like a tree where there's like, or think of it as a graph, there's a node in the middle, which is the adversary's goal. And then there's different ways of attacking it, and they kind of branch out from the middle node. If you go all the way to the leaf of a tree, then there's an actual attack sitting there, okay? And then the intermediate nodes are sort of like the more general ways of doing that attack. Like I want to attack the system in this broad sense, and then this more specific sense, and then the actual specific attack is at the end. And you might have 2 attacks that are similar. Similar means they share some parent node, okay? And so similar attacks will end up in the same part of the tree. This will make sense better in a second when we actually do one. If you start at the root and you walk along the leaf to the leaf of the tree, it should sort of tell a story of the attack. The adversary has this goal, that's the opening of the story. They want to attack this, they want to do it, but they can't do it because of this, so they do this other thing instead, and then eventually you get all the way to the attack itself. Okay, and a tip is when you start with the root goal, when you're looking at a node in the tree, you just ask yourself, why can't the adversary just do that? The adversary wants to do that, so why can't they do it? Usually because there's some defense mechanism. And then your next like kind of node would be like, let's defeat that defense mechanism. Then you say, well, why can't I just defeat that defense mechanism? Well, there's this thing that prevents it. And then I want to defeat that thing that prevents it. And so you sort of go attack, defense, all the way down it. Okay? Again, we'll keep these in mind when we do an example. So we'll do a short example first, and then we'll do a longer example later across, like I say, across 3 lectures. Okay, so this is a parking lot. When I pull into the parking lot, I get a ticket, and I put it on my dash or I carry it with me. When I leave the parking lot, I go to a pay machine, I pay, it does something to the ticket, And then as I'm driving out, I feed the ticket into a machine, and then I get out of the parking lot. Okay? So that's like a sort of security mechanism, and the security mechanism is basically to stop people from parking and not paying. Okay? And there's actually a bunch of things that are in service of that goal. So let's say I want to do an attack tree, and my goal is to leave this parking lot without paying. Okay? So that can be the root node of an attack tree. So it's a specific goal on a specific system. There might be other things that this parking lot's trying to prevent you from doing, but in our case, we're just focusing on the one attack, which is just, I don't want to pay, I want to leave. Okay? All right, so how can I do it? How can I leave if I don't want to pay? So, okay, so now let me put it in terms of the tip here, which is you start thinking about the defense and then how you break the defense. So the first thing I say is, well, why can't I just leave? I didn't pay, why can't I just leave? And so the answer is there's this barrier, right, that's blocking me, okay? So that's the first thing. So I'll think, okay, one attack would be to defeat the barrier. If I defeat the barrier, right, then I get out. How can I defeat the barrier? I could break it. I could just drive through it. Okay, so that's an attack. It wouldn't go directly from leave the parking lot without paying to break the barrier. It would probably go to leave the parking lot. The thing that prevents me is the barrier. So somehow circumvent the barrier. How do I circumvent the barrier? I break it. Okay, so there's that middle or intermediate idea of circumventing the barrier. Now, the reason we put it in a tree is you can ask yourself, is there another way to break the barrier other than physically breaking it? So is there any other way? The barrier is what's stopping you, right, from leaving, right? You can drive through it, so that's one option. Is there anything else that you could do with the barrier to get out of the parking lot without paying? Okay, so if the arm is open, then you don't have to break it. You can just drive out, right? So that might be another idea. It's like, okay, I want to circumvent the barrier, so I'm going to wait till the arm is open. Then I'm going to drive out. But is the arm always open? It's never open. But what are some circumstances where it's open? Well, if someone is pulling out in front of you, right, and you tailgate them basically out, you could get out, right? Two cars tailgating each other don't really look that different than, say, a car with a trailer, right? They're both like two objects that go out, or like a truck or something like that. So probably the gate wouldn't come down in the middle if you tailgated them enough. Okay, so that's another idea. It's related to the first attack because both of them have to do with circumventing the barrier. Okay, what are some other ideas? Whether it's with the barrier or anything. If you, sorry, say again? Okay, so is there any way to open it other than paying? Manually. Okay, so is there a manual way to open it? Okay, so you could push, you could try and pull. So that might be one thing, right? That might amount to breaking it. Usually there's a key or a button or something like that, right? And so if you have that key or button, then it's going to open for you, and that's fine. What stops you from just pressing the button and opening it? Yeah, usually there's someone watching it, or it's in a booth, it's locked, something like that. So then you can say, okay, well, how do I defeat that? How do I get into the booth? Yeah. Okay, so you could social engineer them, distract them, have someone sneak in, press the button. You could try and get the key itself. You could try and steal the key. You could take a picture of the key and 3D print that key, right, and then open it. Another thing is, what happens if the power goes out? Yesterday I was teaching in Hull, power went out. Okay, so your car is sitting in this parking lot, the power is out. Does the arm open and close when the power's out? Maybe there's a generator, we'll assume there isn't. Yeah, so why is it open? It's sort of an obvious question, but.
It's meant to open if there's no power.
Okay, so you don't want to lock everyone in, because it's not their fault that the power went out, right? So, people want to leave in their car, and so you're just going to accept the fact that you're going to lose money by keeping it open, okay? So you could trigger a power outage somehow. then it would be open, and then you wouldn't have to pay. Okay. Now, another terminology that we're going to see 10 times before this course is done is sometimes we think about failure mode. So when a system fails, what do you do? So in this case, if the power fails, that's a failure mode. In this case, we say it fails open literally because it opens up. So in the failure mode, it's permissive, right? It lets you do the thing that it's trying to prevent, okay? So we call this a system of fail-open system, and we're going to see that concept again. So we'll see it in protocols and things like that. Like when things are going wrong and nothing's working, do you fail in an open way that's permissive, or you can fail closed? So fail closed would be you could say in a power outage, we're just not going to open the bar. Then we're not going to lose any money, but then conversely, people are going to be mad because they can't get their car out, okay? So usually it usually is like more secure to fail close, but it's worse for usability to fail close. And so people want a fail open system. But anyways, anytime there's a fail open, you can try and exploit it as an attacker. Okay, other ideas? Okay, so forget about the ARM. The ARM opens if you have a ticket, right? If you put the ticket in. So why don't you attack the ticket system itself, right? So this is a different branch from the tree, right? The earlier branches were all about like the ARM and how do you get around the ARM. So they're all organized in one section of the tree. Now we can attack the ticket system. So what can we do with the ticket? Okay, so we could try and fake the ticket. We could fake the payment that goes in to buying the ticket. We could somehow like mess with the machine so that maybe an unpaid ticket, it reads as being paid. There's another attack. This I discovered myself personally parking at Concordia inadvertently. So it's has to do with repudiation. So repudiation is kind of the weird one of Stride that you don't often see. So what happened is very simply, I just parked, I got the ticket. It had like a barcode, not a QR code now they do, but it had like a mag strip barcode. I folded the ticket so I could put it in my phone case. And then when I went back, it wouldn't scan because the barcode was folded, right? So I just said, look, I folded it, I'm sorry. And they just opened the door and let me out, right? Because it was easier than whatever the alternative was, okay? So that's an attack in a sense. So you could do something to damage the ticket purposely, hoping that they'll let you out for free. And just like any repudiation attacks, they're the kind of thing that usually work once or twice, right? But if you go every day and you park in the same parking lot, after 3 times of folding your ticket, they're not gonna let you get away with that anymore, right? So repudiation like tends to work, yeah, a couple times, but then over time you get a reputation and then it doesn't work. Any other ideas about how to get out of this? Okay, so I think we did pretty good. So roughly speaking, again, this is just a quick example. There's probably 100 attacks, but we'll just go through a couple rough ones. I had thought that maybe you could try and get around the robotic arm, or you could get around paying. If you want to get around the robotic arm, you could try to physically get around it, like you could drive through it, break it. You could also maybe drive around it. So it depends on how it's structured. You could tailgate another car. You could trigger a power outage. It will fail open. The attendee usually has an override, so you could use social engineering, or you could 3D print the key. So here's some pictures of just someone driving through, breaking it. Here's probably the worst parking gate ever. So what's going on in this picture? Okay. So there is this gate, it stops the road, but people literally just drive around it on the grass and then get around it. This just shows you that, like, if you can get a photograph of a key, you can more or less 3D print it. So now it's like, even if you have like keys on your belt and you're walking around and there's security cameras or surveillance cameras, anyone can make a copy of your key. So keep that in mind with your keys. And then on the payment side, you could counterfeit the money. You could claim to have paid even though you hadn't. You could tamper with the ticket. You could ruin the ticket. Was my thing. Here's another one. You can. Okay, so normally when you pay, you pay for how long you're in the parking lot, right? Let's say you go in the parking lot and you leave 5 minutes later. You drive around. There's no cars, it's full of cars. There's no empty spots So you just drive out, you're out in and out in 5 minutes. Are you going to pay just for the luxury of driving around? No. So most things, if you like leave within 10 minutes of getting the ticket, you're not going to pay anything. Okay. So why don't you just walk up and get a new ticket? You're going to your car, you're about to leave, you're walking past it anyway, so just press the button, get a new ticket, and then when you leave, just use the new ticket, and it looks like you've only been there for 5 minutes. Okay, so generally that doesn't work because the new tickets, they won't give you a new ticket unless if there's a car sitting at the ticket booth itself. And the way that works is there's a weight sensor, right? So then what if you got a whole bunch of friends and you all stood, by the ticket, and then you press the button, right? Then it would probably give you a new ticket and you could leave, right? Or you could have a friend that has a car and they could pull up, get a new ticket, but then instead of going into the parking lot, they could like drive back out, like reverse out and give you the ticket, and then you could not pay. Or you could even do an elaborate scheme, which is something we see. There's an attack in voting called chain voting that's related to it. But what you could do is, let's say I'm leaving and there's somebody that's coming in as I'm leaving. What I'll do is I'll say, I'm going to switch tickets with you. Okay, so I get their ticket, I get out for free. Now they're stuck because they have not only all the time that I've been there, but all the time that they're going to be there as well, right? Okay, so it's worse for them than just not switching, but have faith. What will happen is when they go to leave, someone else will be coming in and they'll do the same thing. They'll say, I'll give you this ticket for your new ticket. So then they end up getting out free. The person who takes this old ticket now has like 2 people's worth of time on it, right? So it's getting to be a worse and worse ticket, right? But everyone else is getting out for free. As long as there's always someone else coming in when you're leaving, then you can do it forever, in theory. And most parking lots have like a rule that, let's say you lose your ticket, it happens, right? Then there's a set fee, right? It's like, okay, it's $25. It will be way more like in Montreal, but it might be $100 or $200 or something like that. So eventually the ticket would be, there would be more time on it than it is just to pay the maximum. And so then you would just rip it up and pay the maximum and say you lost it or something like that, right? So basically everybody in your chain could park for free for just one set price of whatever the maximum ticket is. So that's a very sophisticated attack. Probably no one's going to pull it off, for something that's like low value like parking, and it would be a lot to like coordinate people coming in and out at the same time. But in theory, that's a kind of attack that the system doesn't protect against. Okay. Okay, so this is like what an attack tree would look like, a simple example of it. And we can see that, if we have the goal, right, it's sort of the root node. The leaves are, like say this chain attack, that's the actual attack itself. And then if I follow the path, it kind of tells the story of the attack, right? So I want to leave without parking. I can't because I have to pay. So I'm going to try and somehow get around paying. Whether I paid or not, well, that's determined about whether I have a good ticket or not. And so to get a good ticket and not have to pay, I'm going to get a fresh ticket. Fresh ticket is great because it's real, it's legitimate, it's not fake. But at the same time, it doesn't cost anything to leave with a fresh ticket. The only problem now is how do I get a fresh ticket, right? Well, there's this weight sensor that protects me from like going up and just pressing the button, right? Otherwise, I would just press it and get it. So instead, I'm going to do a chain attack, or I'm going to get all my friends to stand on the weight sensor and then get a ticket, okay? And so story from root to leaf, and then similar attacks, like getting a ticket with another car and backing away, or getting a lot of friends. These are very similar. They're a lot more similar than driving straight through the barrier, right? And so similar attacks are organized, they're sort of together in the tree. And then you can look at any sort of super node, like say evade robotic arm, and then you can try and think of, okay, are there other ways? I have 4 ways of evading it here, but are there other attacks? Right? And so sometimes by sort of organizing them, you're able to brainstorm better what the attacks are because you can find different attacks that you haven't thought of. Okay? So this is why it's like sort of better than just having a list of attacks to actually organize them in some fashion. Okay, questions about attack trees, what they are, anything about it? Okay, good. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do a attack tree for something called HTTPS. Don't worry if you don't know what that is, I'll explain it. And yeah, it will be a bigger attack tree, and we'll take a couple lectures in order to do it. Okay, what is HTTPS? So HTTPS is a network protocol. So it's a protocol or an algorithm, and it basically has to do with how you access the internet. And in particular, if you're downloading websites, you're going to use a protocol like this. Okay, so the protocol to fetch, say, a web page, you go to a web server, you say, give me index.html, and it sends it back to you. It's called HTTP, okay, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Right? So it's for passing around not just HTML, you can pass around JavaScript, fonts, style files, Flash, YouTube, whatever. So there's lots of things, MP4 files, MP3 files. And by default, HTTP has no encryption. Okay, so there's no security on it. It's just everything's in plain text. You never are connected literally directly to the website. Like there's no wire that goes from Concordia to Google, for example. You're going to route through a bunch of people in order to get to Google. And if you don't have encryption, then everyone can see what's happening over that channel. Okay, so HTTPS is the cryptography, which is called SSL or TLS, layered on top of HTTP. And together we call it HTTPS for HTTP Secure. Now this cryptography itself, it sort of goes back to 95. So in this class, we'll talk about three things that happened in 94 or 95. So this lecture, we're going to talk about SSL. Later, I think towards the end of the course, we'll talk about same origin policy, and we'll talk about cookies and cookie policies. All three of these were like introduced around 94, 95. Why 94, 95? Anyone want to guess? Okay, the first need for security. First need for security where? For the web? Yeah, okay. And even more than like the first need for security, it was actually the start of the web, more or less.
The web to more people. So more people were in danger of getting hacked or getting spied on, and so they had more security.
Sort of. So yeah, so you're sort of painting a picture of there were a bunch of people on the web for a while, and then at a certain point they realized we need security, and that happened around 94, 95. It's more that there weren't a lot of people on the web until 94, 95. So 94, 95 is when Netscape Navigator came out, and that was the first browser that you could just download, install. You didn't have to be like on a special university network or anything like that. It was just a general browser for browsing the internet. And then Internet Explorer came out in 95, and that came with Microsoft. And so 94, 95 is more or less when the internet went from being like a special tool that like some people did to like, okay, everybody's going to use the internet and have it on their own home computers. And so the reason, and then you had to come up with all the policies about how the browser is going to behave. And so that's why a lot of stuff happened in that era. Okay, so SSL 1.0 was just internal. It never got released. The first version is called 2.0. It came out in 95. Then it was 3.0. Then it sort of switched hands. So it started off as like kind of like a private, like Netscape, IBM, those types of companies were sort of in charge of standardizing it. And eventually they said, okay, this internet stuff is too important to have companies involved. So we're going to set up an independent body called the IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force. And so to this day, they kind of govern the standards around all web stuff. So the IETF changed the name of it. They changed it from SSL to TLS. SSL stands for Secure Session Layer. TLS stands for Transport Layer Security. If you know the OSI model of networking, if you don't, it doesn't matter. You'll recognize the terms transport and session. They're two of the layers in the OSI model. TLS actually operates at the transport level, not at the session level. So it was kind of like not named very well in the first place. So that might be one reason why they changed the name. But anyways. Okay, so and then TLS 1.3 is the sort of latest version that kind of got standardized and finalized in 2018. Today, people are working on TLS 1.4. What do we want to see? We want to see post-quantum security and a bunch of stuff. And so eventually that will get standardized as well. There's a lot of attacks on like the earlier versions, so 2.0, 3.0, even 1.0. They have different attacks that are now kind of scrubbed out of the protocol, but we'll look at all the different attacks on SSL, even whether they work today or they worked on previous versions, just to understand what they were. Okay, let's say I go to a website and I'm accessing the website over HTTPS as opposed to HTTP. How do I even know the difference? Okay, so this is now in danger of being out of date because browsers are just like this year making changes to this. But traditionally what would happen is you would see a lock, and the lock would indicate that you're over HTTPS. And then the other thing you could do is you could explicitly type in a URL that started with HTTPS:// instead of HTTP://. Okay, and so that would force it to go over to SSL. Now, these two things are not exactly equivalent, as we'll learn. This means that you did use HTTPS to fetch it, but there might have been a problem with the protocol. It's still going over HTTPS, but your browser might not be happy with it. So when it displays the lock, it's going over HTTPS, and we're really happy with the connection that was formed. We think it's secure. There are some side cases where you could technically be doing HTTPS, but it's not secure, and then your browser might decide not to show you the lock, or it might show you some more complicated lock, and we'll see some examples of that later. But in general, these are more or less the same thing. Okay, how do you get to an HTTPS page? So I don't like HTTP. I'm scared about like doing things that aren't encrypted. I want to use HTTPS. How do I make sure that I get to HTTPS? Okay, so one thing is I could type it in explicitly, right?
There is also the redirection.
The
Like when you set up HTTPS on a server, there is a redirection that is, if the client accesses HTTP, they get HTTPS anyway.
Okay, all right. So two ideas. One is I can type it in. Now, how many in the room type HTTPS in front of all your URLs? Probably not many, okay? Second thing is if you go to a server and it's on HTTP, then they'll redirect you to HTTPS. Now, there is a problem with that. Actually, I'll save it for later. But anyways, that is one thing that you can do in theory. How do you generally go to websites? Okay, you Google it, you click on links, you follow links, okay? When you're following links, how do you, let's say you're going to end up on the HTTPS version of Wikipedia or the HTTP version of Wikipedia. How do you end up on one instead of the other?
Depending on the link.
Okay, it depends on the link. Who controls the link?
The person that put it.
Okay, all right. So if I, for example, Google something and it shows me a Wikipedia article, and I click on the link, whether I end up on HTTPS or HTTP has nothing to do with Wikipedia. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with Google. Google is giving me that link. They're deciding, hey, I could redirect you to HTTPS or I could keep you on HTTP. Okay? And Google spends a lot of time, they used to anyways. Now, much of the web runs on HTTPS. It's more or less turned on everywhere. But they used to spend a lot of time on cases like Wikipedia because Wikipedia themselves did offer both, but they tended to prefer HTTP. So they would sort of by default like send you to HTTP. But if you typed in HTTPS, there was a live Wikipedia that was served over the internet. And so Google like kind of equivocated for a long time about whether they should send all Google users to HTTPS. Because there's encryption used, there's the thought that it's going to be more expensive. That's sort of the reason for why you might not want to turn it off, because you have to encrypt and decrypt all the data. Okay, so there's a performance hit. Now, in reality, encryption is so fast, it's supported by hardware that the change is basically, there's no difference between it. And so it's not really a big concern. So eventually, Google switched to HTTPS after like there was a big espionage leak by someone named Edward Snowden. We saw his video actually in one of the lectures earlier. He leaked a bunch of NSA documents. NSA is the US government. And one of the slides that they had was around HTTPS and the fact that they could break it at a certain point in HTTPS. And that spooked a lot of people in the community. And so they all decided to switch from HTTP to HTTPS. That was one incident. There was another incident about something called Firesheep. And then that was also something that got a lot of people interested in it. We'll talk about Firesheep in a few slides. Maybe next week, I can't remember. Okay, so you can end up on an HTTPS website because you type in HTTPS explicitly. You clicked on a link, and the website with the link decided to send you to HTTPS. There's a couple other things. There's redirection, so that was mentioned. And then sometimes your browser just knows that a website should be over HTTPS. For example, let's say you're using Google Chrome, and you're going to Google search engine. Google makes Chrome, and they control the search engine. They know that it's over HTTPS, so Chrome will not let you go to HTTP. Now, if you want Chrome to do that for your website, you can try and do that. So Chrome has a list, and you can submit your website and say, you know, for my website, I'd like to be on this list of websites that only will get served over HTTPS, and then no Chrome user will, like the browser will fail if you try and go to it over HTTP, regardless of whether you support it or not. Another thing you can do is, as a website, you can set a flag that says, only access me over HTTPS, okay? So now the problem with the flag is the user doesn't know the flag's there until they go to you the first time, okay? So the first time they go, they're going to go over HTTP, right? And then after they go over HTTP, they'll grab the flag. It will come down with the website. They'll flip it in their browser. So the browser will make it sticky. It will remember that you should only go over HTTPS. And then from that point forward, it will only access you over HTTPS, okay? But if there's an attacker that's going to attack that, they're going to attack it on that first instance where you asked for it. And so we call that trust on first use. It's another security like kind of thing that you're going to see 4 or 5 times throughout this course, okay? You have some interaction. You just trust that it goes well the first time. And if it goes well for the first time, then it's going to go well forever. You set some things up, and then it's good. We don't like trust on first use. We rather just have it work regardless of first use. But sometimes we settle for a trust on first use. Okay, so HTTPS kind of looks like a tunnel. This is the mental model you can think of. So here's Alice, here's Concordia. There's a bunch of nodes in the middle. We call them man in the middle. You can think of it as person in the middle or something like that, but that's the standard terminology I'll use. Could be a woman though, is the point. But anyways, so the man in the middle attack is basically someone that's intercepting the traffic along the line. And the idea of the tunnel is that the tunnel is going to protect your data from the man in the middle. Okay? All right. What do we want from HTTPS? So if you look at this picture, what's the security property that we want?
Encryption.
So encryption is how we get the security property. So yeah, but what is encryption giving you?
Like privacy.
Okay, so privacy. So basically I want to put a credit card number, a password, cookie, session ID, or just any information at all, right? And I want to put it into the tunnel so that the man in the middle can't read it, okay? So confidentiality or privacy or secrecy, that's the property that we want. Is there any other property we might want from this tunnel?
Security of the packages,
What does security mean?
like not be opened until it's reached the destination.
Okay, so that sounds like the same thing, right? So it's protecting it, so secret.
Integrity maybe.
Okay, and what does that mean?
Maybe.
What, integrity means?
Like you send something and you have something arrive.
Okay, perfect.
There's no alteration.
Okay, good. Okay, so the second property that HTTPS gives you is integrity, message integrity. And this basically says that whatever packet Alice drops into the tunnel, that's the same packet that's going to come out the other end of the tunnel. If it's not, if it differs even by a single bit, we can't really stop it. The man in the middle can change things. It's not like a tunnel where they can't reach in, like it's an encrypted tunnel, so they can still scramble up messages and things like that. But what we want is a detection mechanism at this end, okay? So the server can detect that it was tampered with, and then the server can do what it wants. It can ask for it again, or it can just drop the connection. And same thing in the reverse direction. So whatever information the server puts in, bit for bit, that's the information that comes out the other end for Alice, all right? So we have confidentiality, we have integrity, message integrity, and there's one other property. It's hard to see, but see if you can see it.
The response is the same.
Okay, so that's the same as integrity. Yeah.
Is there a link with speed, maybe?
So it's not, yeah, it's a good guess, but no. Okay, why do I care about privacy? Just forget about the other property for a second. I have a password. Why do I care about putting in a tunnel?
To be sure no one can extract it and use it.
Okay. All right, so we don't want someone to steal it or use it or anything like that, okay? Now, does that mean nobody ever learns my password? Okay, so who learns it?
Yeah, exactly.
So we don't want the attacker to learn it. But the browser knows it, right, on this end, because I type it into the browser. And let's say it's a credit card. It's maybe a little easier to see. So I don't want the attacker in the middle to get the credit card, right? But the Amazon or whoever I'm buying from, they do need the credit card, right? So that's why the tunnel ends, right? It ends and then it comes out in clear text, right? Same with my password. The tunnel ends. They have to take my password, hash it, and compare it to the password that they've registered. So they need to see it. That type of thing, okay? Same thing with integrity. If I download, let's say I download Tor, like we did, I get it from torproject.org. Because it's coming over HTTPS, I'm sure that there's no malware that the man in the middle inserted, right? They didn't put any malware in the middle because I had the secure tunnel, right? That's message integrity. But that means that the file I received is exactly the file that Tor sent, right? Okay. All right, any guesses?
So the server knows the end.
Okay, great, perfect. So I need to know, if I care about having a tunnel, I need to know where the tunnel ends, right? If it doesn't, let's say the tunnel ends at the adversary, right? Then you might as well not have a tunnel at all, right? You're tunneling to the adversary and then the adversary is lifting your password out or they're lifting out the things, okay? So we call that server authentication. You can think of it in two directions. Originally with HTTPS, people thought it would be useful for users to identify servers or websites and vice versa for websites to identify users. So you would have mutual authentication. But the way the web evolved for whatever reason is we just ended up with one-way authentication. So we can identify the servers that we're connected to, but the servers don't authenticate us, all right? Instead, they authenticate us through usernames, passwords, cookies, that kind of thing. So they don't authenticate through HTTPS. You could do it in principle, and the protocol supports it. But the way you authenticate involves cryptographic keys, and it's kind of complicated for reasons that I think at some point we'll talk about. But anyway, so yeah, so we just have one-way authentication, which is server authentication. Okay, so in review, confidentiality, you can't read the data even if you're on the path. Integrity, any modification that's made along the path, you can detect. We can't stop it, but we can't prevent it, but we can detect it. And then server authentication, we know where the tunnel ends. This is important because if we think we have a tunnel to Concordia, but in reality, we just have a tunnel to the adversary, and then the adversary can make their own tunnel to Concordia, then they're reading everything that's in between, okay? Okay, perfect. So put a pin in that thought. And in next class, I'm going to ask that question, how do we know it? And you're going to say certificates. And then we'll talk about whether that solves the problem or not. All right. Okay. But for now, we don't know where the tunnel ends. Okay. All right, so let's go back to the attack tree. So I want to do an attack tree, and my attack tree is I want to break HTTPS, okay? Now, because attack trees are one attack on one system, I actually have to pick one attack. Like this would be a whole attack tree, attacking this would be a whole attack tree, and attacking this would be a whole attack tree, okay? So I'm going to choose just to attack the first property. So I'm going to choose to attack message confidentiality. But as we'll talk about, if I can break these other two, then I can maybe end up breaking this. By virtue of breaking one of these two, it might allow me to break the first thing. But that will come later in the middle of the tree. Okay, so I'm going to define my root node to be observe traffic. So I'm breaking confidentiality. sent over HTTPS, and I'm going to assume I'm already a man in the middle on this connection. Okay? How do I become a man in the middle? That could be its own attack tree. Okay, so I'm just going to assume that I'm already there. I'm not going to concern myself with how that happens. In real life, I could be your Wi-Fi router. I could be malware on your Wi-Fi router. I could be your employer, the network that you connected to. I could be malware on your machine. I could be the NSA with spy computers in the back end of the internet. I don't know. There's lots of ways of doing it. I could be in a van with a fake cell tower, and you're connected to my cell tower thinking that you're connected to the cell network. Or Wi-Fi too, yeah. So you can poison the Wi-Fi router and get everyone's traffic routing through you. We'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, so I'm going to assume that's already there. And now I want to brainstorm what's every possible way we could break HTTPS. Okay, even though there's encryption and it's really strong, there might be ways that we can still break it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split my attack strategies into 3. And we'll sort of do a lecture on each of them. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to sit back and say, I'm going to assume that the crypto is perfect. It's bulletproof. I'm not going to be able to break it. But I still am seeing stuff. I'm seeing scrambled up data going around. Maybe I can still learn something even though it's all scrambled up. Okay? So I'm just going to inspect the traffic even though I'm outside of the tunnel. So that would be the first kind of class of attack. The second thing I'll do is I'll try to break into the tunnel. Okay, so I want to break the encryption or whatever it involves in order to get into the attack. There will be some crypto details, but I'm not going to quiz. It's not going to be a crypto course where there's going to be crypto questions on the exam or things like that. But what I'll do is I'll show you the high-level principles of the attacks. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get the tunnel pointed at me. So if I can get the tunnel pointed at me, you think you're connected to Google and you have a tunnel all the way to Google, but in reality you only have a tunnel to me, then I'm able to read your traffic and do what I want. Okay, so that will be the final thing. All right. Now there's one thing that's just in my mind from earlier. I wanted to say this earlier, but I wanted to introduce message integrity first. Let me just go back to this slide for a second. We talked about redirection, and I hinted that it wasn't secure. Now that we know that HTTPS provides message integrity, HTTP, not only can you see the traffic, but you can change it. There's nothing stopping you from changing it. Okay? Let's say I'm in the middle, I see a user, they're connecting over HTTP. I know the server is going to throw a redirect and get them on HTTPS. Once they're on HTTPS, then I can't read the traffic anymore. What am I going to do? I'm just going to change that redirect. I'm going to stop the redirect from happening, and I'm just going to let it continue as an HTTP connection. Okay? So redirects are kind of like the least preferred way of these, because if there is an adversary in the middle, they can stop that redirect from happening. And let's see. Pinning also relies on message integrity. This is why the trust on first use is important. I go to a website and it's going to say, only access me over HTTPS. Okay? But if there's a man in the middle when I go to the website and the website sends back the packet, remember that I only want to do HTTPS, the adversary is just going to drop that packet. Okay? It's never going to reach me. And so I'm never going to know that that pin was set. That's why it's trust on first use. I need the adversary to not be on the connection the first time. Then I get the pin. And once I have the pin, then the adversary can be on the connection every time going forward. Okay? So that's what TOFU means essentially, is that you assume there's no adversary the first time. You're able to set something up, and then you're able to bootstrap that into all future interactions, and it's fine. But if the adversary is there the first time, then you have no security or no protection. Okay? Anyways. Okay, so we're going to start with the first, which is inspect from outside the tunnel. So the sub-goal here, where do I have it? I kind of reordered them. So I say recover partial data from external observation. So that's what we're going to call the node. And so basically, because HTTPS is secure and there's stuff going over the tunnel, I'm not going to be able to access what's going over the tunnel. If I'm able to break into the tunnel, then I'm going to put the attack in the second category of breaking into the tunnel. So for now, I'm just going to focus on what do I learn even if I can't break the tunnel itself. Okay, so does HTTPS, is it really like true, complete, comprehensive security, or can you still learn things even without a tunnel? Okay, so that's good. So keep that in mind. So let's say I want to go to a destination, concordia.ca. How do I do it? So I type concordia.ca in my browser. I hit the enter key on my browser. What does my computer do? How does my packet get to concordia.ca?
DNSs like Google, Fire, and from DNS, it's redirected to
Okay, so the first thing I'll do is talk to DNS. Okay, so what does DNS do exactly?
Transforms the name into an ID.
Okay, so computers are not identified by names. They're identified by numbers. Numbers are kind of like telephone numbers. There's a hierarchy. So every time you send a computer a number, they're like, if it's bigger than this number, I send it down the left wire. And if it's smaller than this number, I send it down the right wire. And then the next computer does the same thing, and eventually it gets to where it's supposed to get to. Okay, so that's more or less how routing works on the internet. Now, why don't we just remember numbers? So if DNS is going to translate google.com into whatever, and Google has some number, why don't I just type the number in?
There can be hundreds of numbers, and you won't be able to remember any website.
Okay, so it's basically just a usability thing. It's a lot easier to remember words than to remember numbers. So the user wants names. The internet wants numbers because you can't route a name. And so what's the compromise? The compromise is we have a translation service that turns names into numbers, or vice versa if you want. Okay, so we call that translation service DNS. Anytime you go to any website, now first off, you can literally type the IP address in. So if you know it, you could put the IP address in, https://IP address /index whatever, and it will work if that IP address is correct. Another thing though is that sometimes Google will have multiple IP addresses because they're load balancing traffic from all over the world. Sometimes they change their IP addresses and things like that. And so people, whereas their name they can keep forever. And so it's more of a permanent naming strategy as well. Okay. All right, so I go to DNS and I say, give me concordia.ca, and DNS sends me back some IP address that looks like this. All right. Now, when I say I go to DNS, what does that mean? How do I get to DNS? So, okay, so those are guesses. Do you want to commit to one of the guesses?
There is both, but it depends on the configuration. Like it could be the computer, it could be the router, it could be the browser.
Okay. So my computer knows how to get to DNS somehow. Okay, so how does it know how to get to DNS?
If it's on the router has its own DNS.
Okay, all right, so let's go through them one by one. The browser could have a DNS, probably won't happen because then everyone who uses Chrome will use the same DNS and it's probably far away, kind of thing. The internet service provider, this is how it works by default, okay? So when you go and what does it mean to have like an internet service provider? What it means is really that they just give you an IP address, and if you write that IP address on any packet, when that packet comes back to that IP address, they send it to you. Okay, it has there's a physical wire between you and them, right? But basically they're just saying every packet we receive that's addressed to this IP address, we're going to forward it to your computer or to your router, and your router will figure it out. Okay, that's what internet service really means. So when you get internet for the first time, you basically say, give me an IP address, and they say, here's your IP address. Okay, now when they tell you what the IP address is, they also tell you what the DNS server is. Okay, you don't have to use that DNS server, but it's the one that they give you. Okay, so there's a protocol called DHCP, I think, and sometimes if your internet's like flaky or something like that, you might say, I want to reset my DHCP. So you basically say, I forgot my IP address, give me a new one, and then they give you a new IP address and a new DNS and all that stuff, and sometimes that fixes particular issues. Okay, so I get my DNS from the ISP. And then if I move from Concordia, so Concordia is giving me my DNS now, but when I go home or I'm on the cell phone or whatever, I'm getting a different DNS server. Hopefully it's closer to me because I have to like use it every single time I have a domain name and I need the IP address. You're using it a lot. So you do want a DNS server that's local to you, okay? Can you override it? You can. There are companies, centralized companies like Google that offer free DNS services. Okay, so Google has one that's 8.8.8.8 or 4.4.8.8. And so you can type that in and you can override it. So you can tell your ISP, just give me the IP address, I got my own DNS, doesn't matter. All right. So sometimes people do it. Actually, it's a good point that I'll make in a few minutes later. What else do I want to say about DNS? Okay, that's probably good for now. Okay, let's go there now. First off, is your connection to and from DNS itself over HTTPS, or is it Is it an encrypted channel?
It could be. It's not forced.
Okay. So what's the default?
Default is not.
Okay, so that's correct. So the default is that there's no encryption between you and the DNS server. Okay, why? Mainly, it's kind of a speed issue, and it also has to do with these certificates that are coming later. They're big. It's a lot of information, and so generally it's not encrypted. Okay, there are two movements toward adding either encryption, so that's called DNS over TLS. So you would actually do a TLS connection first. And then there's another thing that we talked about in the first lecture because it has been abused for denial of service called DNSSEC. And DNSSEC brings you signed information. So it's not encrypted, it's still in plain text. But what it does is it gives you a signature on the domain name and the IP address. So if the adversary is in the middle, you know they're not switching out the IP address. Okay? That is one thing the adversary can do. So an adversary over normal DNS, if they want to send you to their website, right, when they see the real DNS packet coming, they just switch the IP address to their own IP address. Now you're going to their server instead of going to the proper Concordia, okay? So that it's very simple. Now, sometimes this is done deliberately, okay? So let's say that you sit down at a cafe and they want you to pay for the internet, okay? There's different ways of doing it. It's called a captive portal. And now they tend to be more secure. But in the early days, what they would do is they would actually give you an IP address because in order to pay it, you need an internet connection. You have to at least put your credit card number in. And so you need some sort of connection. And so they would give you an IP address, but what they wouldn't give you is DNS. So if you typed in google.com, it wouldn't go anywhere because it couldn't translate it. Now, if you happen to know the IP of google.com, you could type it in and press enter and it would work. Okay, so the internet is live. They're just not giving you a DNS service. Okay, or if you know that Google offers free DNS, you could just say, you could set your DNS to 8.8.8.8, and then all of a sudden the internet's working, it's free. Okay, so that was like one way to get around the captive portals, but now they tend to be like smarter about how they do that. Another thing that happens is sometimes there's blocking that happens at the DNS level. Okay, so the organization you work for, if you have like parental control software, that kind of stuff, what you could do is you could set your Wi-Fi router up with a DNS that gives you like a list, and then you can say, don't let anyone ever go to this domain, or go to the top level domain like .xxx. So that was like, there was a move to push all pornography to .xxx so that it was easy to filter it. Based on, you could just look at the top level domain and then filter traffic based on that itself. So anyway, so there is some shaping that can be done, traffic shaping, just between you and your DNS server. Okay, so DNS queries are not encrypted, so the adversary learns the domain that you're visiting. So right now they know Alice is going to go to concordia.ca. All right. Then Alice does it, and they go to concordia.ca, but now they have a secure tunnel between them and Concordia. Let's say the adversary wasn't able to intercept DNS. Say they're further away from the user, but they're in the middle here, somewhere here. Do they know whether the user is going to concordia.ca or not if it's in the tunnel?
I think yes.
Okay, we think yes. Why?
Because I think if I remember correctly, the packets has like both the IP and the
Okay. So forget about whether they know Concordia.ca itself. Let's just ask, do they know the IP address? You can always do reverse DNS. So you can go to DNS and say, here's the IP address, who owns this domain? And that's sort of trivial to do. So is the IP address of Concordia, is that something you can see from outside the tunnel, or is that going to be something that's inside the tunnel?
Outside.
And why?
Because if not, the packets wouldn't know where to go.
Okay, exactly. So we need to route the packet to where it's supposed to go. The packet has to end up at Concordia's server, and the only way to route it is to have the IP address not in the tunnel. It has to be in clear text, okay? So the mental model you can think of is like an envelope. Like say you're sending someone a message, like a letter, and you put it in an envelope and you seal it. Everything that's inside the envelope is sealed. The mailman or mail person, mailwoman, they can't read it. Well, I mean, you can defeat an envelope pretty easily, but anyways, it's protected. Okay, but the address still has to be on the outside of the envelope, otherwise it won't get to where it's going. Okay, and in internet, unlike mail, you usually send mail one way, but internet's back and forth. So your IP address and the IP address of Concordia need to be on the envelope. Okay, so both addresses are there, unless if you're using Tor or something like that, then it would be Tor's IP address, the exit nodes on it. But anyway, there's going to be a sender and a recipient IP address. It's in the clear text. Okay. So domains themselves can be invasive in the sense of, like, from a privacy perspective, if someone's surveilling you and they want to know what domains or what websites you're visiting to, just seeing the domain name itself could leak information. Okay, it might be enough. Like, I don't know why you're going to WikiLeaks, but I know that you're going to WikiLeaks, right? Or whatever the domain is itself. Okay, so even though you have HTTPS, you have a secure tunnel, you have this lock, every person in the middle knows exactly what websites you're going to. All right, governments that have firewalls and things like that, they know the websites that you're going to, even with this protection itself, okay? So you can get information about what people are doing, even with HTTPS. Yeah.
So they see the thing because of DNS, but if we use the VPN, so they're not going to see it.
All right, so if I use a VPN, what they're going to see is it depends where the adversary is, but let's assume that they're between the VPN and the server, right? Then what they're going to do, they're going to see the same information going back and forth, but instead of Alice's IP address, it would be the VPN's IP address. Yeah? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, on this side of the VPN. If they're if they're on both cases, they can see Alice talking to a VPN, they know the IP address of the VPN, they can see the VPN talking to Concordia, then they can infer that what she's doing, kind of thing. Yeah. So that, and Tor doesn't protect against that if the adversary's on both sides. Yeah. Okay, now let's say that I go to Wikipedia. So here I am, I'm on Wikipedia, and there's the lock. All right? So the lock says I'm on HTTPS, so that's fine. Just to reiterate, let's say Concordia's spying on me. Does Concordia know that I'm going to Wikipedia? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes, they do. Okay, they have to because, or at least they know the IP address. They can reverse the IP address. Okay. Now I happen to be looking at this article about CF Montreal. Does Concordia know that I'm reading the CF Montreal article on Wikipedia? Okay, so we think not. Why do you think? I don't expect you to know the right answer, but what do you think?
Sure, but I don't remember if there is the path of the
Okay.
path included in the visible packets.
Okay.
I think it is.
Okay, so one thing is the path. So the path you can't see here in the screenshot, but let me just go to Wikipedia here
I
first.
think the path is inside the visible packets, but I'm not sure.
Okay, so the URL, this is probably a little small, but I'm going to end.wikipedia.org, and then path, the term path means everything after, so /wiki/CF Montreal, okay? And the question is that in the envelope or is that outside of the envelope? Okay, you had a point?
Yeah, after the domain name is inside the envelope, but Google can see the URL and APIs that connected to the site. For example, the PNG files or anything related
Okay.
to the website itself.
Okay. So I'm going to get there exactly. So I have slides about that. So we'll talk about that itself. But when you download this website, it's not like the entire website is sitting at that URL. You're pulling down images and other stuff, and they may be coming from other URLs. Okay. So that will complicate the picture as well. Okay. All right. So the answer is that HTTPS would say that the path is inside the envelope. Okay. So Concordia should not know that I'm on CF Montreal. All Concordia knows is I'm doing something on Wikipedia. They don't know what exactly I'm doing itself. Okay. So that's the guarantee. So if we want to go through a website, so this is sort of what it would look like. So I would go to DNS. I'd say, give me the IP address of Wikipedia, and I get the IP address. Then I would put the IP address in my browser. My browser will do this automatically. And I'll say, get me the file that's at this path, wiki/CF Montreal. I'll send that to Wikipedia. And then Wikipedia will say, okay, I have that as an HTML file. I'm going to send it back to you. Okay? Why can we put this in the envelope, but we can't put wikipedia.org in the envelope?
Because the path is needed for the server, but Wikipedia is needed for the routing.
Okay, so we don't need it to route, right? We just want to get the packet to Wikipedia. Once Wikipedia takes possession of the packet, they're going to decrypt it. The tunnel ends at them. Then they're going to pull the path out. They need to know the path, right? But nobody between me and Wikipedia need to know the path, okay? So it's something that only Wikipedia need to know. Just like if you send a letter to someone and you say, give me this document number 57, the letter has to get where it's going, but the fact that you want document 57 as opposed to 64, the mail person doesn't need to know that, okay? All right, so the path will be in the tunnel. It will be encrypted. The response will come over the tunnel. So the adversary just sees encrypted traffic flowing back and forth between Wikipedia and nothing else. Okay. Now what will happen is, as mentioned, there'll be like some images or something on the file on the screen, and so the index.html file itself will say, "I want you to load this image." It will tell your browser, "I want you to load this image." Okay. This is the number of pixels that it's going to be. You need to fill that space that I left in the HTML with an image, but I don't have the image. It's not in the HTML itself. You could hard code it in, but like nobody ever does that. It's not something that's done. So here's a link to where you can get that image. Okay, and the link could be from Wikipedia itself. It could be from anywhere else. You could link to some image that's from Google or Cloudflare or whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay, then what your browser will do is it will go over to that second URL and it will download that image. Okay, and will this happen over HTTPS or not? It depends on how this is coded. Okay, so index.html will say, go get an image. I'm going to tell you where. And when it tells you where, it's going to tell you also how. It's going to say, get it from https://upload.wikipedia, or get it from http:// okay? So index.html itself is choosing to send you over HTTPS or not to go get that image, okay? That's an important point, and we'll come back to that later. Like, you might have questions of like, let's say I fetch the original page over HTTPS, but then I go and load a bunch of images and they're not over HTTPS, then would you say that I downloaded that whole page over HTTPS or not? You know, is the browser going to show the lock on a page like that, or are they not going to? Okay, so these are questions that we're going to have to deal with eventually. But for now, we'll just pretend that it's clean and everything's happening over HTTPS. Okay, now we could have an adversary and they could be in the middle of both of these connections. Okay, and so again, all they see is Alice in this case is talking to Wikipedia, and Alice is also interacting with upload.wikipedia.org. They don't know the path, so they don't know I'm looking at CF Montreal. They don't know the HTML, so they can't read the article I'm looking at. They don't know what logo I'm asking for. They don't know the file name of the logo. That's going to be part of the path. And they don't see the picture itself. Okay? So the picture itself, the name of the picture, the file that I'm reading, like the article I'm reading, the name of the article I'm reading, all that stuff is hidden. The things that aren't hidden are just the source and destination by IP address. Does that sound good? Okay. So if we want to kind of dump everything that gets loaded If you go to a website like Wikipedia, you'll see, so we can actually do this. So it's fun sometimes to play around with. So you might have to turn developer tools on for your browser, but all major browsers have more or less the same set of developer tools. It looks like this. And so if I go to network and then I refresh this, you can see this is, so sorry, I have it on image itself. Let me do it like that instead. These are all the files that got downloaded when I'm looking at this page, okay? So it's not like everything's in that first HTML file. There's a bunch of other stuff that gets downloaded. You can go through and see, this is the actual HTML that loads everything. But then the things that are being loaded, how do I get out of this view? There's things like PHP, so these would be like scripts that are running server side. There's PNGs, so that's images, pictures. SVG is another image type. There could be JavaScript. Wikipedia is actually a pretty clean website, and they tend to host everything like within their own servers and things like that. But if you go to like a messier website that has a bunch of ad libraries and stuff like that, like TSN, you can see all sorts of stuff being loaded, a bunch of errors in the JavaScript that's being loaded, and it's all like kind of a mess. So anyways. And you can also see sort of over time the packets come in. And with websites like this too, they just are constantly loading new stuff. So like even though I'm not doing anything, I'm just sitting back, there's like new files that are getting loaded and probably like ads and things like that that are changing. Okay, so roughly speaking, we can just sort of look at like what there is here. So we have the file name that's being downloaded. We have where it's being downloaded from. So like it's being downloaded from wikimedia.org. You have the fact that it's being served over HTTPS or it's not being served over HTTPS. That's indicated by the lock. We have the kind of file it is. So a PNG, for example, would be an image. The initiator don't worry about. We have the size of the file, and then we have the time is just like from when you got the first file, how long before you asked for the second ones and got them. This is more for like debugging purposes. All right, so let's go through one by one and think about, are they in the tunnel or are they outside of the tunnel? Okay, so the file name itself. Okay, so we think in the tunnel. Everyone think in the tunnel? Okay, so that's right. Oh, so actually this gives all the answers right away. Ignore that, although now you can see all the answers. Okay, so this is in the tunnel, right? What about the fact that we're going to upload .wikimedia.org? Is that in the tunnel or not? Okay, so that's outside because we have to route the packet to that server, okay? The fact that it's going over HTTPS or HTTP, can the adversaries tell the difference? They can, yeah, so it's going to look completely different. They can even see like there's a special handshake that happens when you start an HTTPS tunnel, so they know for sure. What about the fact that it's an image that I'm downloading as opposed to JavaScript or something like that? Okay, so that's going to be inside the tunnel, all right? So the file name, the type of image it is, the image itself in the tunnel, the protocol that I'm asking for it over not in the tunnel, and the server that I'm getting it from is not in the tunnel. What about the size of the file? Is the size of the file going to be in the tunnel or outside of the tunnel? Okay. Well, okay, so I think I heard inside and outside. What? Give me an argument either way.
When you look at the packet and it's encrypted, the size is about the same.
Okay.
It's part of the metadata that's outside the package.
Okay. All right, so there's two places the file could show up. So one is that when I send you a file, I might tell you how big it is, just so you know how many packets you're expecting and things like that. So that would be like the metadata. That's actually would be inside the tunnel. So all that information would be in the tunnel. The second thing is that when you encrypt data, let's say I have a file that's 2.21 kilobytes. I encrypt it. Is the encrypted version also 2.21 kilobytes? Okay, so you would say it's smaller? Okay, so it could be the same size. Does anyone think it's the same size?
It depends on the type of encryption. But
Okay.
It can be smaller, it can be heavier sometimes.
Okay, so it could be bigger, smaller, or the same size. Okay, so it could be smaller because of compression. So let's get that one out of the way. HTTPS by default does not do compression. There is a version of HTTPS, and there's alternatives to HTTPS called like SPDY. We'll talk about them a little later because actually compression is one way you can exploit things. They do layer compression on top, but out of the box, HTTPS does not do compression. They rely on the fact that a PNG is already compressed. So the file format did the compression already, so they don't want to add extra compression on top. So setting that aside, if I tell you that there's no compression anywhere, does that change your opinion? Do we think it's going to be the same size, bigger, or smaller?
Possibly same size.
Okay, so it could be, okay, so it could depend on the encryption, as mentioned. So what about the encryption would change the size of it?
How it encrypts the packet, because sometimes you can take a smaller part and encrypt it and it's a little longer or a little shorter.
Okay, so the way encryption works is there's two main branches of encryption. There's something called stream ciphers. Stream ciphers were supported by HTTPS for a long time, but now are no longer supported, mainly because we can't decide on a good stream cipher and the old ones were broken. It would encrypt byte by byte. Okay, so you would take a byte of plain text, turn it into a byte of ciphertext, and go byte by byte. What we use now is called a block cipher. So AES is the major one that's used. What AES will do is it will take a chunk of about 256 bits. There's different modes of AES, but it will take 256 bits, it will encrypt it, okay? So if your packet doesn't, if it doesn't quite fill that last 256-bit block, it will round up to the nearest 256 bits, okay? Now, the difference of 200 bits, that's not bytes, that's bits, right? That's not going to show up when you're talking about something that's kilobytes, okay? So it's going to be such a small difference anyways, it's going to be the same size by the time you get here, okay? So when you encrypt data, it does not change the size of it. It's length preserving. Generally speaking, it may depend a little bit on the encryption that you're doing, but for all the encryption algorithms that are in HTTPS today, it's length preserving, okay? So just put it in your mind that when you encrypt things, it doesn't change the size of them, okay? And that's more or less true. When you take 6110, you can, learn all the like nuance of whether that's true always or not. Okay, so the size of the data won't be disguised. Again, you're going to see ciphertext, but based on the ciphertext size, it's going to look like it's plain text size. Okay, so now let's go back to this example. All right, so I go to wikipedia.org. I'm looking at some website. Let's go back to Wikipedia. The adversary doesn't know that I'm reading the CF Montreal this web page itself, right? We agree? Okay. But what they do see is they see all of these resources being loaded. Okay. Can they count up how many resources get loaded? So every one of these will be an independent connection. There is some caching, so like if I have copies already because I've been browsing for a while, then I might have it cached. But let's take caching out of the equation for a second. Then they'll see that I form exactly 87 outbound connections. Okay?
They wouldn't know exactly at one page, but they could group it and have most of them.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll see a burst of activity where I'll go to Wikipedia, I'll do something with it, a packet comes back to me, and then within, you can see the time here, so within 250 milliseconds, which is probably faster than I can click on another link, right? I go and ask for 87 things, okay? And 87 things come from all these different servers, right? And do they know which servers those 87 things are coming from?
Yeah.
They do, okay? And do they know the size of everything that's coming down?
Yeah.
They do, okay? All right, so that's a lot of information, okay? So they know I went to some some article on Wikipedia. I don't know which article it is, but it's an article that loaded 87 resources, and the sizes of the 87 resources loaded were such and such, okay? And the order that they were loaded and all those types of things, okay? Now, let me ask you a question. If I go to a different Wikipedia article, let's say I go to CONCACAF Champions League, does this article have the exact same number of pictures as this article?
No.
Probably not, right? Let's say it does. It just by chance it happens. They both happen to have exactly 87 pictures. Is the size of this picture going to be bit for bit identical to the size of, say, this picture? Probably not. Okay? How many pages on Wikipedia? Wikipedia has millions of articles about all sorts of stuff, right? But how many pages have exactly 87 resources and all the images are exactly the same size? There's 3 images that are, whatever size these big ones are. There's a whole bunch of little flags and they all have a certain size. How many exact pages on Wikipedia are going to have that exact fingerprint for it? None, right? This is going to be unique. It's going to be the only page on it, okay? So if the adversary's in the middle and they have no idea what I'm doing, but they know I'm going to Wikipedia doing something, and they can see every resource that I load, they can count them up and they can see the size of them, could they fingerprint which article I'm looking at? The answer is yes, they could do it, okay? So did HTTPS prevent the adversary from learning that I'm reading about CF Montreal? It didn't. It failed, okay? Does that mean HTTPS is broken? No, it's doing what it's supposed to do, right? Okay, so the problem is that in my mental model, I hear I have a lock, I'm secure. And then there's the fine print of, yeah, you're secure, but you can see all the resources and the sizes and we don't protect against that and blah, 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 blah. And then you realize that in practical terms, I'm not secure, even though I'm supposed to be, okay? So we call this a fingerprinting attack. And not every website is as complicated as Wikipedia with so many resources and things like that. So somebody did a study where they went around to a bunch of different websites, so like healthcare, finance, legal services, videos like on Netflix and YouTube, and they asked themselves, can we fingerprint it? Visit it first ourselves, get a fingerprint of what it looks like when you download it in terms of sizes and resources, and then observe a user go over HTTPS, and just based on matching the sizes and doing pattern matching, could we figure out what exactly they're looking at? And they found that with about 90% accuracy, they could. Okay, wasn't perfect, it wasn't 100%, but it was good. It was like 9 out of 10 times they could tell exactly what people were looking at. Okay, so this hopefully is a little scary, right? It means that HTTPS is a lot less secure than maybe you thought when we started the lecture. Now, there is good news, though. The reason that I can do this attack is because I can go to the website first, I can fingerprint what it looks like, and then I get to see you go to the website over HTTPS. But I have to go there first to fingerprint it, okay? Can I fingerprint every website on the web? I can't, but why? Is it an efficiency issue or what's stopping me?
Storage efficiency.
Okay, so assume I have infinite efficiency. I'm the government, I'm the NSA, I have warehouses full of computers. Okay, so I don't have access to every website itself, right? So what I can do is I can go to any public website. So Wikipedia is a public website. Anybody can go to Wikipedia. If me and you go to it, we see the same thing, okay? So I can fingerprint that website. Could I fingerprint your inbox for Gmail? No, because I don't have your username password, okay? So that's a private website. Sometimes people call it dark web, but usually dark web means like the Tor stuff that we talked about last lecture. So there's the private web, and that's everything that's behind a username password. Because I can't go there first to fingerprint it, then I can't attack you going there, okay? So I can't read your emails over HTTPS using this particular attack, okay? So it worked on Wikipedia because it was a public resource. It doesn't work on private websites, okay? A lot of the stuff you care about from privacy perspective is private stuff, right? You probably care more about someone reading your Gmail than knowing what you're reading on Wikipedia, for example, okay? But you should keep in mind that for public websites, this fingerprinting attack basically, people can identify exactly what you're going to, even if you have HTTPS. Okay, so fingerprinting only works on public websites that you can train on or you can fingerprint first before you go to. And you might say, well, the adversary has a Gmail inbox, but that doesn't cut it because their inbox looks different than yours. So they'll fingerprint their own inbox, but your inbox is completely different. Okay, now let's talk about the fact that, let's go back to this picture for a second. So I'm loading a bunch of content. Let's say some of it comes over HTTPS, like the original website comes over HTTPS, but when I start reading index.html, my browser does, it sees that it needs to go load some pictures, and these pictures are only over HTTP. So your browser does it anyway. It goes, it gets the pictures, it puts the pictures in the website. But now the browser is trying to decide, when I show this to the user, should I put the lock here or not, right? When I put the lock here, it means that this website was encrypted. But what does that really mean? Does it mean that this image, this logo of CF Montreal was encrypted? Does it mean every single picture on this was encrypted? The JavaScript that's running, was it encrypted? Or does it mean some of it was encrypted? Does it mean that the first thing that got downloaded was encrypted, but the rest maybe was, maybe wasn't? Okay, so we need a policy for that. So browsers have to decide how to handle it, okay? So before we set the policy, or I tell you what the policy is, does it matter? Can we think of reasons why maybe it matters or maybe it doesn't matter?
Depends if it's public, I guess.
So let's say it's public.
If it's public, it doesn't really matter if the image is loaded or the JavaScript loaded by HTTP.
Okay.
Anyone that goes on the website will get the same.
Okay, so it's not quite true that everyone would get the same thing because the adversary will be attacking some and not others, right? So the adversary's in the middle and they have the potential to swap things out. So that's what not going over HTTP means. So the server will try to serve up the same content to everyone. So that part is true. But what gets to me as the user at the end is now could be influenced by the adversary. So with HTTPS, the adversary can't change anything. So this is another way of thinking, a better way of thinking of it maybe. Do I care whether the adversary swapped out this image for another image or swapped out the font for another font or the JavaScript for other JavaScript? Do I care about that as a user? Yeah, probably, right? I do care about it, okay? Now, the other thing is browsers don't want to break the web. So let's say lots and lots of websites are doing it. They could say, you know what, we're not going to show a lock in this case. But now you go to every website and there's no lock anywhere because everybody has their images sitting unencrypted because they're big files and they don't want to encrypt them because of performance issues, okay? So browsers also don't want to do that either, okay? So what browsers decided to do is they decided to kind of do something in the middle, okay? So what they did is they said, first off, we think it matters a lot about whether an adversary can tamper with, say, an image or JavaScript. If they can tamper with an image, all they can do is change that picture. Okay, so that's bad, but it's not super bad. If they can tamper with JavaScript, the way JavaScript works that we'll learn later is if you get bad JavaScript running on a website, even one script, say you downloaded 100 scripts and one of them is bad, that one bad script can undo everything the other 100 scripts are doing. They can completely rewrite the whole website. They could make the website look completely different. They could load any other images they wanted. They could load other JavaScript that they want to. They basically, it's like giving root access to your view of the website. Okay, so JavaScript is very bad. If you get bad JavaScript running, you've probably heard of attacks like cross-site scripting and things like that. That's basically just means someone got bad JavaScript running on a website and now you're wrecked. You can't, it's all bets are off in terms of what you can see, okay? So what they said is it's really, really bad to have JavaScript running. And if it didn't come down over HTTPS, then the adversary could have tampered with it. And so we're not going to display a lock in that case. Okay, in fact, we're going to do something worse. We're actually going to block it completely. We're not even going to let the user download it. it's going to break the website. There's going to be an error, like at least in the logs of the website, and that's fine. The user just won't be able to use that website, and maybe the server will fix it once they realize that they have 1 million users that can't access this website. Okay. There's other things that are considered active content. So active is JavaScript. The reason it's dangerous is because it's code. It's running. Okay. It's not something you look at. It's something you run. You execute. So anything else that gets executed or is executable is going to get considered active content. And then things where you just display it, that's considered passive content. Okay, so a picture, a movie, an audio file, or something like that. It just plays. You could play the wrong thing, but you couldn't like rewrite the website because you had a bad picture on the website itself. Okay. So this is what Firefox does. Different browsers do it slightly different. What Firefox will do is they'll show you the lock. Let's see, I just have to remind myself exactly the permutations. Okay, so if the website comes down and everything is over HTTPS, you don't load a single resource over HTTP, then you're going to see a normal lock. Okay, so that means not only did the root website come down over HTTPS, but every resource that's on it is. Okay, so it's perfectly secure. If some of the content came down over HTTP, it's going to depend on which content. If it's just things like images and things like that, we're still going to show you a lock, but there'll be a little kind of like warning symbol with it. Okay, so it means that it's kind of like the images, it's more or less a lock, but there's some red tape or a footnote or something like that about it. Okay, so the default is it looks like a lock, but there's something funny about it, so it's not quite a lock. Okay, it's kind of like getting a half dot, and this would be a full dot. And then if there's active content, then it will show a slash through it. Okay, which is meant to indicate that even though you typed in HTTPS and I'm showing you HTTPS:// we don't like what we saw. And so you should consider it as if there is no lock. You should consider it as if the whole website was downloaded over HTTP. Okay? And then in addition, what they'll do is if it's JavaScript specifically, they'll actually just block it completely. They won't even show you this. They won't even run it. They'll just block it. It will break the website. That's fine. Okay. There's a website that you can play with. Called badssl.com. And if you want to see how your browser will react to different kinds of errors, it's just a website that's set up with basically every kind of error that could get triggered by something going wrong with HTTPS. And so for mixed content, they have these ones here. So this is Safari. So if I go to this website, which has a mix of images and content, you can see Safari's decided not to show me the lock. Okay, it still says HTTPS. Actually, let me back up. Okay, sorry, I have to reset my knowledge because Safari changed how they worked in the last year. Let me actually go to something that, I wonder if they have a website that's just not over HTTPS. Oh yeah, so this is good. Okay, so Safari used to show you the lock when you're over HTTPS, and then they wouldn't show you the lock when you're not. This has now changed. Again, it's a very new change. Now, because everyone uses HTTPS, they said instead of us showing you a special thing when it is secure and not showing you anything, by default, we're not going to show you anything if it's secure. Okay, so if it's secure, we're not going to show you, there's going to be nothing. And if it's not secure, we're going to write the word not secure. Okay, so in other words, we're going to flag things that are insecure as opposed to flagging things that are secure. Okay, so it's kind of a switch. Okay, so this is not a secure website, as you can see, because it explicitly says not secure. This is a secure website, even though there's no lock. The fact now no lock means that that it is secure. So I'll have to update the slides, but anyways. Okay, so then if I go back to this mixed content, you can see that they didn't write not secure here anymore. Okay, so that means that Safari's happy with this website. They consider it to be secure. did this picture here actually come down over HTTPS? So I can't tell just by looking at this. If I'm a developer, I could go into this and I could see that you can see there's a lock here, but a bunch of stuff didn't come down over the lock itself. Now, let's see what's happening here. Actually, I'm not sure how to interpret it. This Zotero connector actually has nothing to do with the website. It's an extension. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, so ignore the Zotero connector. That's something that I have installed. That's an extension. It injects JavaScript into every website. It has nothing to do with this website here. But you can see at the bottom there's a warning. It says, this page requested insecure content from this image.jpg. However, Safari said, you know what, I'm just going to try and see if they'll give it over to me over HTTPS. I'll just try anyways. They tried, the website was set up so it also gave it over HTTPS. They were able to get it. So then they loaded it over HTTPS. So then when the image shows up here, it says that it was loaded over HTTPS here. So that was Safari being clever, and they were like trying it. But if this server did not have this image served over HTTPS, then presumably Safari would look the same thing. It would just have an error instead of a warning there. Now, let's say I download a mixed script. Okay, so this is like, there's bad JavaScript coming down. In this case, what Safari decides to do is they show me the website. They don't say anything about it not being secure, okay? But if I look under the hood, I'll see that they blocked the script. So this content was blocked and must be served over HTTPS. So basically, they whatever the JavaScript was, it's here, nonsecure.js. You can see it didn't get loaded. It's not in the list of resources that got loaded. Safari stepped in, they blocked it. But after they blocked it, they said, well, everything else was over HTTPS. So that's fine. We're going to consider the website that I'm showing you right now that has the blocked script. That's fine. It's everything else is over HTTPS. So we're not going to say not secure. Okay. And then in the slides, I have, I think, this is what Safari used to look like. So this is the old version. I'll update them. But for very bad .SSL, it wouldn't show the lock. So in other words, it would be insecure. And then it would show that it was blocking content. So this was blocked. And then these two, it was just warning you that it was trying to display this stuff that's not secure. Okay, so anyway, so mixed content, whether it displays the lock or not, it's going to depend on whether it's active or passive content. In some cases, if it's really bad, it will explicitly block it. For some browsers, they might show you different kinds of locks, or in Safari's case, it's just either there's a lock or there's no lock, and then there's going to be some warnings that are generated in the log about stuff itself. Okay, any questions about mixed content? Okay, what's another way of attacking HTTPS? So another thing we could do is, let's say that we can't break it because it's in a tunnel, but we just store it, and then we're hoping that in 20 years or 10 years or 2 years, we have a quantum computer. And you probably heard that cryptography breaks with quantum computing to some extent, right? Is it possible that we break it then? Okay, so the answer is yes. So we could break it in the future. Now, exactly how we break it, you'll learn about in 6.1.10. So HTTPS now only uses protocols that have a special property called forward secrecy. And forward secrecy actually says that, that you can't break it. Let me try and phrase it correctly. Okay, anyways, if I'm able to get the key, like say I go to Google and I'm able to get their secret encryption key that they're using for all their traffic, I won't be able to decrypt all the stored information I have, okay? If I have a quantum computer, I also will not be able to break it. I would be able to break it if the connection was happening when I have a quantum computer, but if I store it later and try and break it later, it wouldn't break. If I have infinite computing power, or if there's a flaw in the algorithm, or if someone discovers an error in the algorithm, say in 10 years, then I would be able to break it. Okay? So basically what we're hedging on is the fact that we'd be able to break the algorithm, or maybe quantum computers would apply to more kinds of encryption than we think. So it's kind of a nuanced discussion. But anyways, the thought is that people noticed that in Utah there was this site. No one had access to it, so it was some sort of government site. And from satellite images and things like that, you could see from Google Earth, people surmised that they were building this huge, huge data center. And people kind of put two and two together, and they said, okay, this is probably an NSA thing. So the U.S. government, their agency is in charge of keeping American traffic encrypted and breaking the encryption of any other traffic that's not American. So they're sort of defense and offense. And so anyway, the thought, no one knows for sure, but the thought, what it looks like is they're just storing tons and tons of information. What are they storing? They're probably storing all encrypted communication that they can get their hands on. All right. They're not storing it necessarily because they can break it today. They're storing it because maybe in 10 years or 20 years, there'll be a weakness, and then they'll be able to encrypt it. Some stuff they won't care about. So they're more interested in national security, right? Like say there's some terrorist plot and it happens tomorrow. Whether I learn about it in 20, 30 years, probably it's not going to stop it from happening, right? But then there's other things that are like national strategies and things like that. And those things could have effects 30 years down the line. Or you might want to solve certain crimes that were committed, like say 20, 30 years ago, cold cases and things like that. So it's thought that there's enough use for it. So that seems to be like one of the strategies that they have. All right, so HTTPS, as a partial defense to it, they implement something called perfect forward secrecy. This was always an option, but one thing when you do SSL, your browser and the website kind of have a back and forth, and they talk about what kind of encryption they want to use. And the server might have like a priority list where we like to use this kind of encryption, but if the client doesn't support it, like maybe they haven't updated their operating system in a while, then we're happy to do this instead. And so they have this kind of list, and there's this back and forth that goes on. And so it used to be the case that you could choose whether you want to do perfect forward secrecy or not. But starting in TLS 1.2, I believe, definitely in 1.3, you can only do perfect forward secrecy. So if you've taken a crypto course, 6110, you might recognize terms like Diffie-Hellman. So all TLS is based on Diffie-Hellman. It used to be based on key transport protocols, RSA transport in particular, and that's now like scrubbed out. A, because RSA is not really that secure anymore, and then B, they want perfect forward secrecy. Okay, so if you are able to steal keys, then you can't decrypt communication because sessions don't actually use the key. So like Google has a key, they don't actually use it to encrypt the data. What they do is they use it to derive another key, and then once you have the other key, that's the key that's used to encrypt and decrypt. Now, if you're able to get the short-term key, then you can decrypt the information. But the short-term key will be changed every time. And if Google has 1 million people connected to it, it'll have 1 million different short-term keys, one for each person that it's talking to. Okay, so what we can do is we can kind of throw this together into an attack tree. So the idea I had, the first like kind of branch of it was I want to recover partial data from external observation. So in other words, I just want to stand outside of the tunnel and see what I can learn. So everything that doesn't go over HTTPS, I can learn, okay? So the domain that's being visited, it's written on the outside of the envelope or put in a header, as we call it. And so that's something I can learn. If I tap DNS, then I can learn the same information as well from DNS. And if some of the content is going over HTTP, some of it's going over HTTPS, whatever is going over HTTP, I can learn. Okay, so if images are being pulled down over HTTP, I know what those images are. I see the logo of CF Montreal, I assume that they're on that website, or at least a website that's related to it. If JavaScript tries to come down, what I can do is I can modify it if it doesn't go over HTTPS. If I'm able to modify JavaScript, one thing I can do with JavaScript, I didn't explicitly mention it, is I talked about how you could rewrite the rest of the website. But what I could do is I could also just say, what is all the resources that were loaded on this website? I could package it up in a text file, and then I could open a connection to a server and drop that text file on that server. Okay? So let's say you go and you log into Gmail, you have your inbox that's being displayed. Adversary gets some JavaScript that's running in that context. The JavaScript can just say, okay, you're showing the user, like, they're seeing like the names of all the messages, the subjects and things like that. That's sitting in the memory of the page. Just give me that. I can ask for it, I can get it, and then I can send it to wherever I want to. Okay? So if I'm able to modify JavaScript, I can also read everything that's being displayed to the user on a website that is in the same context that my JavaScript's running in. So that's the cross-site scripting attack. If it's a public website that someone's going to, then I can do these fingerprinting attack. So based on like how many resources and where they're coming from and how big they are, I can more or less uniquely identify like 90% of websites. And so I can learn it. And then I can just sort of store it and try and break it later. This is like a government attack, not like a, like a personal kind of attack. Okay, questions about any of these strategies? Yeah.
Or the one about the JavaScript extracting content.
Yeah.
Isn't there, I think it's same origin or something, that blocks access to random websites?
Okay, so there is something called the same origin policy, and it governs exactly if JavaScript gets loaded into a website. Let's say you have a website and it weave together content from a bunch of different stuff, and some bad JavaScript starts running. What's it allowed to access and what's it not allowed to access? Yeah, so that's exactly the same origin policy. Now, the policy will do a whole lecture on it, and you might know that there's been problems with it. And the policy is different than what people would think. So most people would think that if, let's say I get a bad script from evil.com, it can obviously affect any resources that I load from evil.com, but it's not going to affect resources that I load from Concordia.com. But the same origin policy actually says the opposite. So what it says is when you grab the script and you start running in the context of your website, it's as if you made that script up yourself and wrote it yourself. It doesn't matter where you got it from. Where you got it from is just the name of a library that you got it from. And so it will end up running in the same context. It won't be isolated, and we'll be able to do exactly this. Yeah, so that's why it's so dangerous to run JavaScript. Can you isolate content? Could you have content on the website where some stuff your JavaScript can see and some of it you can't? You can, you have to use iframes. So that's the mechanism that you use to isolate content. So we'll talk about that. There's going to be lots of slides about that later. Okay, other questions about this stuff? Okay, so we're actually nice and early. You have lots of time to catch the subway before the strike. And so next class we'll go to breaking into the tunnel, and then we'll also start a bit of the getting the tunnel pointed at you, and then we'll do another whole lecture on getting the tunnel pointed at you. That's kind of like the most substantial attack. Okay, I'll see you all next week.